Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal Among Us. A very good show for you in store tonight. I have Nancy Thames waiting backstage. We're going to talk about her UFO experiences. So it's going to be an out of this world show tonight. Get it? Before we do that, though, that was a bad joke. I apologize for that. Um, before we do that, I want to remind you guys that May 18th this year at Ashmore, Illinois, there's going to be a show put on by After Dark Paranormal and Blondes and Booze. I'll be there along with Robin Terry, the owner, and Josh Hurd. We'll be there. Be guest speakers. We'll have a ghost hunt. We'll have dinner. It'll be a fun day. Make sure you get tickets. They're only $85. It's going to be a fun night. Do the pizza, do the speakers, and then we will go do the ghost hunt. So that's going to be a fun time. So make sure that you get your tickets in for that. You can email me at paranormalamongus72 and I can get you to the right place, or you can email blondesandbooze@gmail.com and you can get tickets that way. So make sure you get your tickets. It's going to be a fun night out in Ashmore, Illinois, in Ashmore Estates. So also, I want to remind you guys that if you have a paranormal story that you would like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, send me an email at paranormalamongus72@gmail.com, and I'll have that link, that email address on the bottom of the screen throughout the show. So, okay, so without further ado, I want to bring out our guest, Nancy Thames. There's Nancy. How you doing, Nancy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Where are you at in the United States here?
I'm in Mississippi.
Mississippi. So you're not too far away. I'm in St. Louis right now. So is it nice and cold down there, or?
It is right now. Today's the first warm day, but we were out, had school closings all last week. So everybody's got cabin fever here. So everybody's ready for spring.
I hear you. We had yesterday, we had a ton of ice in the area. So everything was pretty much shut down. I went out last night and was driving around, and remember how right around when COVID first hit, there was nobody
Yeah.
on the streets. That's kind of how it was last night. It was kind of eerie.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about weather. We are here to talk about UFOs and aliens and stuff. And Nancy, before we get into some of your stories, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Nancy Thames, and I am a lifelong contactee with interdimensional beings and positive extraterrestrials. It started, my first conscious memories are from around 2 to 3 years old. And those conscious memories were very playful memories. They would always come, and I had three grays have always been with me ever since I can remember. One is a female, and they travel in threes. Mm-hmm. And I have learned a lot about these grays. For one thing, they're a reddish brown color, and they feel kind of like a dolphin. I've actually been with them face to face and touched them and run my fingers between hers, and I'm bonded with her. And she is always who comes to get me and always who brings me home from craft. When I get home, she gets me to craft. But first, when I was much, much younger and up until 20s, 30s, something like that, or actually even longer than that. But what I would notice when they would come is I would sense their presence because they're on a different frequency. So I could feel their presence. So then as I would be laying there, I would feel my blanket come off of me. And a lot of times I would keep my eyes closed on purpose because I knew what was happening, but I would keep my eyes closed. I was going through different stages of sometimes it was okay, and sometimes I was fearful. But basically, what they would do is take a scanner, and they would go from my head down to my toes up to my head several times, and then my body would start to float up off the bed. And at this point, I would open my eyes and look around and look down, and I realized this wasn't a dream. This wasn't an out of body experience. physically happening to me. So this is how they transported me. The Greys came to get me, and they are hybrids, and they were designed by the tall Greys and the interdimensionals and the positive extraterrestrials. And basically, they do the legwork, which means they do the back and forth. Um, Interdimensionals and extraterrestrials really aren't comfortable in our atmosphere. The density of Earth is not compatible to them. So they created these 4 foot hybrids designed so that they could do this task. And that's basically all that I know of that they do, or at least with me, that's all they do. Because once she gets me to craft, I don't see her. And then that's when I will have my checkup, or, my little visitation with the interdimensionals, which are humanoid. Some are humanoid looking, some are have human features, but not human at all.
Okay.
And then the tall Greys, and occasionally, very rarely, I'll see a reptilian. And there's many other different types of beings. I've seen aquatic beings. I've seen some beings that look human from about the top, but then if you look down at their feet, they could be animal looking up. So there's a lot of different beings, and they're all on the same craft together. And I would assume that's probably like their mothership. So anyway, so all my life, she was the one always coming to get me. She does not. She has no personality whatsoever, and a lot of people think that they're robotic or robots, but they are biological. And she does communicate with me telepathically, but she's pretty bland. Although I do have a bond with her because she's, since I was 2 or 3, I've always had my visitations, and she's always the one that transports me. So, and I never understood when they were coming to get me, how in the world, when they got me and I was elevating up, and then all of a sudden we would go up through a roof, through the ceiling, or through a door, through a window. And I never understood how that was physically possible.
Right.
So as I've gotten older and throughout time, I've figured out what was happening. And now I understand what they were doing is we are in a 3D world, and every human being is on a vibrational frequency, but our frequency is very low. Their frequencies are much higher than us. So it's almost overwhelming when you're face to face with one, because it's feelings, you feel that frequency, and it's not anything you've ever felt before in your life. And it's your brain has a hard time understanding if it's a good or a bad feeling. You don't really know. But basically what they were doing is they were taking my frequency and using a scanner or whatever device, and they were raising my frequency up to their frequency so that I could travel as they do, which was up through a roof or through the wall or through a window.
Now, going back to, I mean, I have so many questions with all this that I want to try and get in. Back to the beginning, when you first had these experiences when you were 2 or 3, how did you know then what was going on?
Well, I just thought it was something natural. I just thought it was playtime, to be honest with you. They would come into my room, and sometimes when they left, I would run and tell my mother and father there were little beings in my room, and they would just say, "That's silly. Go back to bed. You're just having a very strange dream or whatever." They just thought it was a child's imagination. And other times, I would even, like, before I'd go to bed, I would say silly things. I remember saying these things that I remember at Christmas time when I was about 4 or 5, and I had gotten a little overnight suitcase. And for whatever reason, I thought that they might want that. because I thought it was a special gift that I had gotten. And I asked my mother if I could hide it somewhere. And she was like, "Why in the world would you want to hide your suitcase?" And I said, "The little beings are going to want it." And she was like, there's no, no, there's no such thing. You don't have to hide your suitcase, you know? So,
Mhm.
you know, when I was little and stuff, they never said, do not talk about these things. They just looked at it as an imagination, I suppose. So that, and the reason I know is because as I've gotten older and um, I experienced, they gave me a Kundalini awakening
Mhm.
about a year and a half, something like that, a year and a half ago. And when that happened, it was a freaky, freaky thing. And I wasn't even sure what had happened to me, but I now know that was a Kundalini awakening. And they finally opened my subconscious up and they cleaned out my charkas so that I could start to recall some of these things.
Mhm.
But before all that, I was, you know, it was not an easy path. It was not easy at all. So I was fine with it all until I got up to about junior high, around, say, 12, 13 years of age, because at that age, I was watching things on TV. I was
Right.
hearing what other people say. You know, I was when my mother would be buying groceries, I would slip over to the magazine section and start looking for things of this nature, you know,
Mhm.
astronomy or anything to do with space or anything. They did have some stuff every once in a while about UFOs and different things.
Right.
So I was sneaking around trying to see this kind of things. And then a lot of times we lived in a small town and we would go to a bigger city to shop, especially around holidays and things
Mhm.
like that, or in the summer when we were out of school. And my daddy always liked to go to bookstores, and I managed to find this little small area in the store that had things of this nature. And so I realized that what I was experiencing and what I was seeing other people, things that they were saying, I was very confused because I was not scared, but I became scared at this point
By
because,
the time you got to be in junior high school, right? You
yeah,
were getting
because
scared. Okay.
everything around me. And at that point, when my parents would, you know, I got caught looking at that kind of stuff and I got caught, I would also start talking about stuff that I heard.
Mhm.
And they pretty much shut me down pretty quick and told me that you cannot talk about these things at school. You cannot talk about these kind of things in public. This is
Right.
not something that people like to talk about. And a lot of people have been institutionalized for talking about these things. So my dad and my mom would talk a little bit, but if then if it got to the point that they thought that enough was enough, they would say, okay, that's enough. We don't want to hear any more about this, you know, that kind of thing. So
How many encounters are we talking about from, I guess, from the age 2 until middle school?
how many?
Encounters
All the
are true
time.
all the time.
Even now, up until today, it's all the time. And if they're not with me face to face, coming to get me, they will come into my dream state in all kinds of different ways. And so it's so anyway. So I when I got older, well, they started when I got to my 20s.
Mhm.
They started giving me more conscious time of around them and around the interdimensionals and things. Before, when I was scared, sometimes they would change their image and make themselves and the scenery around. They could use like change the scenery around you, or they could change. They would take something from my brain or from my mind
Mhm.
and pull it, and they could. To me, it would appear like whoever I felt comfortable with. But I
Mhm.
knew it was not the person I was talking to because that person would not be there. And in other words, like if it was a character on a cartoon or character. I knew that it wasn't real, but it was fun and interesting and playful. And I went along with it because no harm was being done. And I was trying to, at this point, when I got to this age, I was kind of trying to figure things out. But
Okay.
when I got to my 20s, I realized even more so that there were different people were having different experiences,
Hmm.
and that was very confusing. And again, I really had nobody to talk to, and this was a very hard thing to deal with on your own, and just not being able to talk about something. And you do sometimes wonder about your sanity, or what's real
Hmm.
and what's not, and all these type things. So I kept my mouth shut, and I suppressed it. But once I got married and moved away from my home, then I would go and maybe purchase a magazine or a book. And so I realized even more so, it was like the type of experiences people were having were not like mine.
Hmm.
So when I became a mother, I am a mother and a grandmother now. But when I became a mother, I had two boys, and I was on a vacation with an ex-husband, and we were at Key West at a Marriott hotel on the beach. And we were in one bed, and my two sons were in the other bed.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden at night, I felt their presence. And I
So,
raised up.
so
Go
this
ahead.
followed you. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
more
yeah.
from
Wherever, it
your
didn't matter
childhood
where I
home.
was.
Okay. So they know where
I
you're at.
mean, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So, wow. So I raised up, and this was three grays. All grays travel in three. I figured that out. But
Okay.
these were not the same grays that come from me. These grays were 3 foot tall. They had on long robes, and they were not the reddish brown color like my female gray that comes for me. They were, the lighting wasn't as good, but we did have kind of a night light or a bathroom light with the door
Hmm.
not all the way closed, so that the kids could go easily to the toilet at night.
Right.
So I could see their outfit, but I want to say they were gray. They were not reddish color. So when they saw me sit up in the bed, one of them came and pushed me on my left shoulder and pushed me back down in the bed, and telepathically told me, "This is not about you." And he said, "Lay down, go back to sleep." And I laid there, and he put me in a sleep paralysis. But I tried to speak, and I
Hmm.
could not speak. I tried to move, I could not move, but I could see through the corner of my eye that they went over, and I saw them get my two boys out of the bed and then proceed to leave. And then I went to sleep. And the next morning, when we all got up, I tried to keep my cool, because at this point I was like, what is going on?
Now,
And so,
I'm sorry, when you woke up, your sons were in bed still, correct?
yes,
Or
they
okay.
were in bed.
Okay.
Yeah, they were back. They were back in bed. So we went to breakfast, and we were sitting at the table, and I said, did y'all have some strange dreams, or, really any kind of dream you'd like to talk about, or anything at all? And they just kind of looked at me, and they were eating pancakes, and they just looked at me and were like, no, kind of like, why are you asking that? And so I just left it alone. And at that point, I didn't say anything, because they were pretty young at that point.
Hmm.
Um, on a
All the while, you
4.
knew what was going on down there.
Yeah, I knew,
Yeah.
and I was very, very upset, because I knew it was happening to me, but I had no idea that this was going to involve my children as well. So when we got back home, I was very, very upset, because I didn't understand, you know.
Yeah.
So I just sit down, I meditated, I took my fingernails. We had carpet in the bedroom, and I just kind of formed a circle around me and just sit down on the floor and just meditated
Mhm.
and tried to communicate with them.
Mhm.
And really and truly, that might be the first time that I intentionally did something like that. And I did it with intention because this was more serious to me when my two sons were involved. So I asked them, told them I wanted to know why this was happening to me, what this all means, and this kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so uh, I meditated, and eventually they came, and the female gray was there, and she took me to a craft. And when I went in the craft, she took me before a group of what they called elders. And these elders were very tall in height. They were humanoid looking, and they were from different races, and there were many of them. I couldn't tell you the number. And I was standing before them, and I asked them, why is this happening to me? What does this mean? And they told me that I had made an agreement prior to being born as a human being to come here and have a human experience, and to be here at this time in history, or this pivotal moment for humanity, to help and assist for humanity to understand that we're not alone in the universe, and what the and to correct all of the misinformation and answer any questions that humanity would want to know the best I
Mhm.
could. So, and they told me, uh, and and I said, well, I don't remember any of this. And they said, okay. And they said, come. And they showed me a vision of myself. And so I saw myself sitting in a etheric, I was an etheric being,
Mhm.
and I was sitting there communicating with them, and they said, okay, it's time for you to come and have your human experience. So I saw myself waiting, and then being told, and then going with them. And they, on the way there, they said, you will not remember this for many, many years after you are born, and we will be visiting you, and at some point we will help you to remember all these things, and eventually it will, you will remember.
Mhm.
So I was just kind of, I didn't know what to think, to be honest with you. And so after that, that's all I remember. I think I flipped out, and so I they probably put me, I have figured out that whenever your fear and your anxiety get overwhelming, whatever we feel, they're telepathic, they feel tenfold. So they do not like this feeling. They are not used to these type of emotions that human beings have.
Right.
So whatever we feel, they feel it tenfold. And so they'll tap you on the forehead and put you in a, it's kind of like it's sedated without the drug, kind of like in a trance, and you're fully functional, like you can walk and you can do whatever. The only problem with this is that when you come back home and you wake up, your memories are fragmented. It's not a full conscious memory, it's just
Mhm.
fragments. And it's very confusing and hard to understand that way.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that they communicated a lot with you. I mean, in the beginning, 2 or 3 years old, how would they communicate? Was it all
Telepathic.
telepathically or okay? Because
Mhm.
I'm sure 2 or 3 years old. I mean, you're not going to be very articulate and
So
everything.
it was telepathic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll have to say that through with me, we started very young. Actually, we started before birth,
Hmm.
and so they've been with me this whole time, and it has changed as I have aged. The way that they did this, it's changed, and they do try to make it as comfortable as possible, but there's times that they would have to introduce their true selves to me,
Hmm.
because I had to get used to the idea of knowing who they really are.
Hmm.
So And that's the part where, for me, it's been different. And even now, sometimes I'm I catch it myself because it's overwhelming the different vibrational feelings that you get when you're around them.
Hmm.
And the interdimensionals are even at a higher vibrational level than the regular extraterrestrials. So it's very strange. And sometimes your body just does not know how to handle these things. And,
Hmm.
we have a dormant, well, it's really not dormant, we have in our DNA fright or flight, meaning that when we come across something that could possibly be predatory in our brain's eye, and that it's not something that we're
Hmm.
familiar with, our body starts to clam up and start. So now what I have to do is, what if I start to feel that, I have to calm myself down and remind myself to allow myself to flow through the experience so that I can have longer conscious times with them.
Right. Now, growing up, let's kind of go back to that a little bit. Outside of your family, so I'm talking about friends and everything, did they know about this as you were growing up in your teenage years?
No,
Nobody knew it outside of your family?
oh, absolutely not. No, my father was a public figure in our community, and no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, unfortunately, that was probably the time when, things like this happen to people, and if people would come out and talk about it, yeah, they're crazy.
that's right.
It's
Yeah. So
little
that was,
different time now. Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole different generation. So as it progressed, I, began to ask more questions from them.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they would say to me, "You already know." And I was like, "I don't know." And they're like, "Yes, you know, look within." So, and other times, throughout my life, this not been an easy thing to do. It was
Right.
not easy at all.
Right.
And I was very fearful a lot. And like I said, at some points now, even I have to, like, mentally try to fight the fear, or try to fight the feelings that I'm experiencing, because it's just such strange and different
Hmm.
things than anything that we've ever experienced as a human being. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just very, very different and very strange. So, throughout my life, I've had, when I was married, I, would talk about these things. And of course, and that didn't necessarily go over very well. So
Right.
I experienced two divorces. That was not fun, and and
Yeah.
different things, many struggles of that nature. And I thought it was the end of the world, because I couldn't help what was happening or whatever. But not
Yeah.
everybody understands these things. So whenever I would get just really down and just at my wits' end, so to speak, depressed, I want, that kind of thing, the whole 9 yards. They would come to me and they would tell me, if this ever gets to be too much for you, you can always come home. And to be honest, they've told me that so many times, and it never registered with me what they meant.
Hmm.
And or I was ignoring it. Something subconscious was telling my consciousness to ignore what they were saying. I don't really know what it was. So as I've gotten older and having more conscious time, I now know that I was an extraterrestrial, and made a decision to come here and have the human experience for this particular reason, for it to help humanity. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, I made this agreement to do this. And most likely my sons did too. One of my sons has exactly the same experiences that I do.
Really?
Yes. And the other one hasn't really, he's living his own life, and he's not ready to really even, jump into all this stuff. He's aware of it and stuff like that. And he remembers things, but he's not ready. He's not ready. And we do not push him because everybody has to. This is not something that you can get used to overnight. This is not an easy thing.
Can't imagine.
And it's, I've had to grow into it. I'm 63 years old now. And up until like around my 50s, and I finally became single. And then at this point, I was like, well, I don't have to please anybody other than myself now. Now I can start looking into who I am and finding out more about my experiences and trying to work things out. And fortunately, my son was old enough, my oldest son was old enough that we could have some talks about it, but he wasn't as his experiences wasn't happening as often as mine, but now he is, and they are. And we've even been in the same place where they've come for us, but different times. We went to a trip to Mexico, and the interdimensionals orchestrated this through me and through him. We don't live together. We live in different homes, same town, but they wanted us both to go to Mexico. So my son bought plane tickets and we flew into Mexico City. And then we took a short flight over to Oaxaca, which is the southernmost state in the lower half of Mexico, and it's on the Pacific side. And they wanted us to go up this mountain. And so we took a bus shuttle up the mountain for 3 hours. And we went up. They wanted us to meet this indigenous tribe called the Zapotec. And these Zapotec culture are also called the people of the clouds. And they live up on this mountain. And they probably live in other places in Mexico as well. But that's where they wanted us to go. So my son and I went, and when we got up there, it was cold. We went the end of September, 1st of October, kind of that week where it kind of split together, right around Labor Day, somewhere in there is when we went. And when we got up there, nobody spoke English. There was no cell coverage. There was no internet. And it was very, very, some places, the shops and stuff in the town, the little community, they had some electricity. Some of the homes had electricity, some didn't. So it was pretty primitive, and it was not a tourist area at all. So it was interesting. We had to we stayed on our telephones a lot, like trying to figure out words to communicate and things of this nature. And we stayed in a cabin on the side of the mountain, which was woods all around it. And so every night that we were there, one of us or both of us at different times would have experiences. And we figured out that they will not take us at the same time. And we figured out that the three that come for me are not the three that come for him. And the ones that come for him are more like the ones that come for me. They are not the little short guys that I saw when he was a little boy. So when they came for him, I raised up and they told me to lay back down. Yeah. But they didn't put me in a sleep paralysis this time because I was conscious. And they told me, this is not about you. And I knew that they were there for him because he has been having an experience. So I laid down and went back to sleep. And so he had his experience. And then 2 nights later, they came for me. And I stood up and I looked at my little gray female, gray. She's not I don't even know why we call them gray, because they're not all grays.
Yeah.
Different races, a whole bunch of races. And only one race is a negative race that you hear all these bad things about. But I've never experienced that. So and she's the reddish brown, and I was standing there and I was running my fingers through hers, and it was very cold, and I took my hand and put on the top of hers, and I looked at her and I said, "You are so cold." And of course, she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, and we just sat like this. And then I looked across the room where my son was in his bed, and I could see him. He kept trying to get up out of the bed, but they had him in a sleep paralysis. He could not, he, he could not do
Right.
anything, and he couldn't speak. And so when that happened again, that mother son thing, that I hollered out his name and said, because I was concerned, and I didn't understand at that time why we just couldn't do this at the same time.
Hmm.
Now I understand, but at that particular moment, I didn't. I wanted us both to have the same experience, but we don't get to finagle these things. They're there for a reason,
They're
and
the
there
ones
is
that are in charge.
negotiation. Yeah, there's no negotiation. They're
Yeah.
task or very task oriented, and nothing
Mhm.
changes. So I left with her, and he remained there. So, and I've learned that the reason why they do that, and they do that on purpose, is because he and I both would be concerned about each other, and we would lose focus of our reason for being there
Mhm.
with, and what they were wanting to teach us.
Mhm.
And they did teach us some very important things. The first thing was that they wanted uh, us to get to know the Zapotecs. And my son, being younger and uh, more active, we were on the side of the mountain. It was a straight incline. Just to get back and forth to our cabin was very hard for me, to be honest.
Mhm.
It was very hard for me.
Okay.
And there were no handrails, so you had to be in really good physical shape and stuff. And I had to have assistance from him just to get back and forth from the room to the places to eat and things of this nature. But and we were without power for half of our stay there. So, and they had no hot water. It was a real primitive situation. But basically, uh, they wanted us. They showed me a vision um, of being. We were in the forest, and they
Mhm.
took their hands out and they said, "Everything is alive, everything is connected, and everything is all one." And they said, "Trees are living beings,
Mhm.
mushroom plants are living beings, flowers, plants are living beings. Everything on earth is a living being." And they said, even our planet Earth is a living being, and that we are all connected. We are all connected, and we're all one. We
Mhm.
are all the same. And that included everything here on Earth, our planet, and all of the fauna and everything that lives on it. And also, we were one with the universe. So, so after that, it just by miracle worked out that my son was able to go visit the Zapotecs. He had to hike a long ways to get to where
Mhm.
they were. And so, which is, they don't like outsiders. And he found one person in the town that could communicate a little of English, and the Zapotecs have their own language. They don't speak. They do know Spanish, I'm sure. I really don't know that, but they have their own language. So um, they wanted us to get to know this race, because they are a dying race, and their race links back as far as the Mayans and the Incas. And they were on the verge of ascension,
Mhm.
and it plummeted. It just ceased. It just stopped. And the reason why is because all of their younger generation left their people, they left their tribe, they left their culture, and they were influenced by technology and materialistic things. So they left, they all left, and went to Mexico City, and from there ventured off into other areas because they wanted to have a different way, try a different way of life. So they are a dying race. So they wanted us to see the impact of what it's like for a culture. And these people are the most eco-friendly people I've ever met in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very happy people. They live very simple lives. Some had some electricity and a lot of them didn't. It was a choice. And, they collected rainwater. They hung all their things out. They didn't have all these electrical appliances, all these electrical things. Some of them in the town, a lot of them had that we saw. It was just not really a town. It was just a little community, and some of them had cell phones and things of this nature. But so they wanted us to understand, because we are looking at AI technology here, and there's a big fuss over whether it's good or evil and all these things. And what they told me is that AI technology is a man-made tool. These things were programmed and created by men. And as long as we keep this technology, and technology is good if it's used in the proper way, it could benefit us in many, many ways if we use our intelligence and use it wisely. And they have seen many, many beings in the universe come to the same pivotal moment like we are in right now. And we are at a stage of evolution, and they've seen other beings coming to this pivotal moment, and many races have completely died out because they misused their technology. So they wanted us to understand these are man-made tools. Keep them as man-made tools. Use our brain. We created them. Stay in charge of it. Don't turn it loose just to operate a whole community. Use our brains, and remember, we made them, and we need to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So then the next day, like I said, my son got invited to go to the village, and so he hiked up there with his translator. And when they got there, the chief, or whatever, the head tribesman, whatever he's called, he walked out of his home, and he looked at my son, and he took his hands out and said, "Everything is alive. We are all one, and we are all the same." And
The same thing that the Greys would say.
Well, it was the interdimensionals. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was, he was just like, couldn't believe it.
Wow. Yeah.
Exactly word for word what they said.
Yeah.
And so he was out there with them, going all through the forest. They were showing him, how they lived. They cooked a meal for him and showed him all these different things, so that he could come back and tell me, because I couldn't walk that distance and do all that stuff in the mountains, because it was an incline. It wasn't a flat area. Everything was like that. So, and he was gonna even think about spending the night possibly, but he didn't. He was so mesmerized and excited with all the information that he had learned from them. And it was like they were showing them, like when they go and forage through the forest getting things, they never take all of it. They appreciate and see the plants as living beings, and they only take what they need. If they don't destroy the whole thing.
Right.
And they were talking about how they could see, certain things. They recognize that these things are living beings and stuff, and it's part of their culture and all this stuff. They appreciate nature, and they're very eco-friendly. So when my son, he couldn't wait to get back. And when he got back to the cabin where I was, he was just like, "Oh, I got so much to tell you." He was so excited. And it was just nonstop for hours. We just talked and talked and talked, and we cried and cried and cried, because it was an unbelievable, beautiful experience.
Right.
So I realize now that everything in my life that has happened since my birth, good or bad, everything in my life happened for a reason. And I think a lot of my things that has happened in my life were things that I needed to experience. And I understand now that it was all for a reason, and it's made me who I am today. You know, I know who I am. I know what my heritage is, and I am happier than I've ever been.
Good.
For so long, I struggled not knowing who I was, where I belonged. You know, I had a feeling that I belonged to the stars, and that I really wasn't from here, but I never really knew, you know. But when they gave me my Kundalini awakening, then my
Then you
subconscious opened,
understood.
all this information came rolling in. And then now, when I still, if I ask something, they'll say, you already know, look within. And
Right.
if I need affirmation, as if I'm doing something right, or if they're, you know, am I doing this the way you want me to? They don't just come down and appear, but they'll do something else. And it doesn't happen right away. But for example, I was riding through an Amish community not far from where I live, and I was riding through it, and it was beautiful. And it was all these sunflowers and vegetation, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. And at that time of day, it was still hot at this time of day. It was before no, it was after the trip. I get confused on time. So much has happened. But it was the time of day was when they were all inside. So when we drove through there was nobody working in the fields. All the animals were pretty much put away because it gets so hot. And so, and I was looking around, and I had been talking. The reason I was in this particular area is that I had gone to a clinic and talked to some mental health therapist about disclosure, and that I felt that it was important for mental health therapists and physicians to become familiar with experiencers and to become familiar what these experiences are like, because as we roll through disclosure, more people are going to come out of the closet, so to speak, and speak up and not be afraid anymore. And some people will start to wake up because we are going through an ascension, and our consciousness is increasing and our vibrational levels are rising, and more people are going to start to be more aware of these things.
Right.
So I went and talked to these therapists, mental therapists. And as I was driving through there, and I was thinking, I don't know if I did the right thing. These people could all get together, because it was a whole clinic, a group of them that I talked to. And I'm like, they could all just suggest that I go to the Lulu bin, you know, that kind of thing. And so I was like, I was thinking, I don't know if I did the right thing. And all of a sudden, telepathically in my mind, they said, look to your left. I looked to the left, and there was a beautiful, bright, silver, shiny, reflective UFO craft. And it was the round circular disc, and it was shiny, and it was hovering. It was not on the ground. It was hovering.
And mentally, the creatures told you this, correct?
Yeah, the beings told me, look to your left. And that's because that was affirmation to me that I had done what they wanted me to do by working towards disclosure, trying to get people in my area of Mississippi to educate, and giving them like proper links to organizations, UAP Medical Coalition, and a group called OPUS, which is capital OPUS. And these are both designed for experiencers, and to help them. And wherever you live in the United States, they try to find therapists. And as this all comes along, I gave them information, and they could join it, or they could take it and leave it, whatever they wanted to do with it. it's not something you can push on people. This is like you can
Right.
lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And I understand all this. It was hard for me. It took me a long time to get all
Yeah.
this figured out. And it's very strange and hard. And this is a worldwide phenomena. This is a big deal. This is a pivotal moment for humanity where we
Mhm.
can either take a negative or the wrong decisions, or we can be positive and make the right decisions. So it's a very important stage of our evolution, and it's the first time it's happened for humanity ever. This is
And I feel that we're in a time now that there are many other avenues to take to
there
where
is,
you
yeah,
can come out with stuff like this and not be ridiculed in certain areas and
exactly.
safe
But
places and
there's
stuff
still
where
people that ridicule me.
oh yeah, of
Believe me.
course,
That's
of
why I
course.
was joking around with you before I came on here. And I know that these things are going to happen. And I'm not always good. Sometimes I'm pretty good at
Mhm.
doing this because I have a Facebook group and I get all kinds of crazy folks because it's open to the public.
Mhm.
So, but there's sometimes, you're having a not feel good or tired day or
Right.
not feel good and you don't tolerate it as well. And
Mhm.
I'm not perfect and I do not know everything, but I
Mhm.
have learned a lot. And it's because of the interdimensional and positive extraterrestrial. So there's a couple of things I'd like to for you to know and other people to know is of every race, there are many different races, a lot of different races. Not all extraterrestrials are positive.
Mhm.
Not all extraterrestrials are negative. The good news is that there's more positive than there are negative. The bad news is the positive and the interdimensional are just now really in our solar system. Some fewer ones have been here and stuff, but like the mass majority of motherships came into our solar system several years back.
Mhm.
I have seen live video feed that the ISS took of all these ships leaving Earth. And the reason that these ships and crafts were leaving Earth is because they told the one race of negative grays and the negative race of reptilians to leave humanity alone. They told them, your time is over. Humanity is now at a intellectual point. They understand we are not gods. We are not angels. They
Right.
understand we could have face-to-face communication with them once they realize they're not alone in the universe. So when they told them to leave, a lot of them did leave. There
Mhm.
are still some here, and they're fighting tooth and nail on their last legs. And when I say that, they are working with the cabal, the black hats, the dark forces of our government, that all these elite rich people that are in charge that have literally manipulated humanity for eons. We are a race that should always be connected,
Mhm.
and we have been separated for eons. Different ways of our society has done this to us in the way that we live. We are born with a social security number, and then we have to work 9 to 5, pay living. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. Some people actually raise other people's children, don't experience their own child's life.
Mhm.
The way that we're living is not right. We should have no diseases. The technology they've been sitting on technology to cure diseases. They've been sitting on technology. We should not be using or paying for any fuels or energy. It should all be free. They've been sitting on this technology for eons. Um, there should be no need for pharmaceutical companies. Everything that we ever needed is on our planet Earth, and
Mhm.
the only reason we are sick and puny is because there's so much toxins in our food, in our air,
Oh yeah.
in our water. All these
Yeah.
things were done intentional to keep us dumbed down. Our pineal gland is what people activate telepathic.
Mhm.
Uh, so all these things, but everybody's pineal gland is calcified and crystallized because of all the toxins. All these things have been done intentional. And it's just like in the past, they used to burn people that had telepathic or could see into future and would call them demonic and all these different things. These were all done intentionally to keep humanity in fear. Fear and ignorance is where they've always wanted, and we have been manipulated all our lives. And now we've been manipulated even more. We've been lied to about our true heritage. We've been lied to about our planet and the history of civilizations on our planet. Um, our history books need to be rewritten. A lot of things they will come to light, and people will learn of these things. And we're going to have to realize that we're going to have to get over and forgive. We're going to have to be more, take the higher ride and realize that a lot of people that made a lot of these decisions, a lot of bad decisions and evil, cruel decisions were made, and a lot of people lost their lives trying to cover up all this information. But we're going to have to remember that a lot of those people are not alive anymore. And we're going to have to take the big step and try to learn to forgive and be happy that we have raised our consciousness, and we're intelligent enough to understand that we need new ways of living and new ways of thinking, and that that past, it has gotten us nowhere. We should not be having wars. We are all alike. When you take off these human suits we're in, we are all energy beings, and we are all look alike.
Exactly.
And when we die, our life is not over. Our soul and our consciousness are not an organ in our body. All the organs in our body die, but our soul and our consciousness goes on. We continue on. We're just basically having a human experience here. And our experience here is very, very short compared to all the other beings in the universe. And this can change, and this will change, because we're becoming more intelligent, and we're aware that we need to pay better attention to what we're being fed, our foods, our water, our air, all these things. We can change these things, and we can realize that all this pharmaceutical stuff are really, our bodies weren't designed for these false chemicals and synthetic things. And there are cures for everything we need. We have lost a lot of the old things from the old days that we already knew, because everything was commercialized with greed to make money. So you have to understand, these people that own pharmaceutical companies are these big elites that own all these oil fields, all these things, these trillionaires have taken advantage of our ignorance and kept us separated and always in fear, scaring us with things. So they've never wanted us to become more intelligent and figure out that we've been manipulated and come together as one. Because what happens when we all come together as one and realize who we are and what our capabilities are for the future, they have no more control over us. They cease to exist. Because here's the biggest kicker. These negative extraterrestrials that have worked with different parts of the government and all these elites and stuff are not a part of the positive extraterrestrials and interdimensionals. They cannot ever become interdimensional. The positive extraterrestrials are allowed to go interdimensional through the interdimensionals. They assist them and allow them to travel interdimensionally because they gave them the technology. But here's the big kicker. Human beings, we have a lot of DNA. A lot of people call it junk DNA or whatever you want to call it. But we have a lot of DNA that is dormant in us, and we have been dumbed down. And, they've kept us suppressed because they never wanted us to wake up and realize how unique we really are and what fantastic beings we really are. We can live longer lives. We can become telepathic. We can do all these wonderful things, and we will become interdimensional ourselves. Something that these lower rim, when I say lower rim, I'm talking about these negatives that live in our solar system, that come from our solar system. They are not interdimensional. And the only reason the positives are is because they work in association with the interdimensionals. And the interdimensionals are of higher consciousness, higher evolution, higher technology. So we're looking at a spiritual awakening here for humanity. We're looking at a change. These things are not going to happen overnight, and they are not here to control us. They are not here. We are here. Human beings are here on free will. These negative ones overstep the boundary. They were not supposed to do that by the cosmic law. So the positive extraterrestrials and interdimensionals only have contact with people like me, people that are in some way direct lineage with them. And I am not the only one here right now that's an incarnate from a race of interdimensionals. From what I understand, there's probably a million other people like me that are here doing the same thing. We wake up at different times or have our Kundalini awakening experience, and then realize and understand what all this was happening in our younger years up to this point. It was a grooming process. Everything was a grooming process to get us prepared for this moment in time.
Right. So, going back a little bit, little ways here, when they come and get you, what did the spaceships look like on the inside?
Well, it's everyone I've ever seen. I've seen some different shaped ones, but mostly they are the round, half the size of a football field, very reflective. Like if the moon is out, it would be reflecting light, very reflective, or the sun, it would be very reflective. They're shiny. But here's the thing that's really strange. When you walk into the craft, it's not the size you thought it was. It becomes way, way bigger. It's like, whoa. It's like, I don't know. It's like you take a book and you think it's just going to open up and be like this, but it opens up. And you can't even see one side to the other or anything. And for me, it's always very bright, but it's a perfect type of light. It's not too bright, not too dim. It's perfect. And if you look around, you can never figure out where the source of light is coming from. It's just there. It's just there. And to me, everything looks white. The outside looks metallic, but on the inside, everything to me looks bright and white, very sterile and very, it's not cluttered. It's just basic, just.
And you're not the first one I've had on to talk about. You mentioned reptilians before.
Yeah, it was Paul the reptilian that I met, and he was in a suit. And
what do they look like?
This one, he was human form. He had no tail that I could see. And when the female gray got me to craft, and I walked, we went into craft, and he greeted me, and I looked at him and I said, "Are you going to let me remember this?" And I said, "Are you please going to let me remember this?" And he said, "Yes." And then he took my hand and we kind of just like, embraced our hands. And then he telepathically told me, "Go get to work." So, and then after that, I kind of started having fragmented memories, because sometimes there's beings on there that when you first look at them, like in the face and stuff, and a lot of them are a lot taller than us.
Mm-hmm.
They look rather humanoid, but when you start to look down, it starts to change. Like they may look more animal like or whatever. So it's sometimes it just gets to be your brain is just like, what is this? You know, what is this? And when I start that, that's when they put me in that trance like state. So
Yeah. I had someone on last year. I believe her name was Joanne Fawcett. She, you know her? Have you heard of her?
no,
Okay.
no.
She had talked about her husband had actually worked, or ex-husband actually worked with uh, extraterrestrials here on Earth, and she mentioned the reptilians, and they I guess they kind of look like a cross between a humanoid and with a remember from Jurassic Park, the raptors
Yeah,
kind of had that kind of
yeah.
head on there. So,
There's many different races of
and she mentioned that too. Yeah,
yeah. There's people see everybody stereotype, think all grays are bad, all reptilians
yeah,
are bad, and that's not true. But
yeah,
there are some negative races for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But when I say they're negative, I don't think they're not demonic. They're just not. They're more. They're only interested in themselves. They're not interested in us whatsoever. They have no empathy for us at
Mm-hmm.
all. And they don't see us like the positives do. They see us as their children and they want to assist and help us to become better beings. They could care less. All they want is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, the Greys were doing a genetic experiments and stuff. And really and truly, that's who you really hear about in the mainstream
The
is
grays.
from about adoptions is the Greys. But I do know that there's other ones
Yeah.
that have negative, even the Arcturians, there's many different ones, Palladians, many different ones, and not all of them are good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like human beings.
Now, do they ever mention that they have bases here underwater and mountains?
They do. I have been underwater in a underwater craft, and I've experienced that,
Mm-hmm.
and they do. And I've been to places that mostly on crafts. And when you get to craft, that's where you start seeing all the different type of beings. And from what I understand, a lot of them live their entire lifetimes on these motherships
Mm-hmm.
because they are in constant travel around places because we're not the only beings
Right.
in the whole galaxy and there's many other
Cosmos.
galaxies, many other universes. And, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
just they're here for us because this is our moment in time.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Very interesting. We're certainly not alone in this universe.
we're not alone.
And
That's for
I
sure.
never didn't believe that, once in my life. I mean, as big as this universe is, there's got to be something, and yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, they're not going to push us into anything. Basically, they are here and
Mm-hmm.
they are waiting for us. They know what we're going through. Our Mother Earth is also going through her ascension and her evolution. She's changing right along with us, and we are changing, and we're going through our ascension. And as this happens, we are going to become more aware of things, and we are going to be aware, and things are going to just be like listen, a lot of people ask me, how do I know if I'm in the fourth or fifth dimension? Well, the fourth and fifth dimension are not physical things. These are high. What this means is higher consciousness, better awareness,
Mm-hmm.
higher intelligence, being able to visualize more other than just the 3D world that we're in. And from what they've showed me is that I'm starting, I can see certain things. I can see UFOs and things like that. And other people can walk right by something and not see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I am on a higher frequency due to their assistance and because I was more open to all this. And then when I had that Kundalini thing, that really did it. But there's things going on all around us that we just cannot see. There could be extraterrestrials right here standing next to me or in the room with you right now, and you would not know it. And the reason I know this is they have evidenced it to me. Mm-hmm. They have proved it to me by coming into where I was and taking the clock. Like I have a clock and it runs on batteries, they would take the clock and move the hands all around and like stop it on the same spot every time, mm-hmm. every single time. So they have evidenced themselves to me because mm-hmm. I asked them to evidence themselves to me. Prove to me you are who you are. I want to know I'm not crazy. You know, I have mentally, with pure heart intention, made mm-hmm. that very clear that I want to know who I am. I need to know who I am.
Right.
So they do little things like that. Now, I do not call them, hey, come down here and show everybody. They are not here to impress people, and they're not sitting up there going to be played like a puppet like we have because of right. our ignorance. They are not ignorant beings. They are a billion years ahead of us in technology, evolution, the whole shebang. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't play games with them. I respect that part of it. And I'm thankful of who I am and that I've got to have these experiences now. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, I don't know that I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's just something that has happened. And apparently, I saw myself. I made an agreement. So, and I couldn't tell you what type of race I was or anything like that. But I do know that every time I go to craft, there is not only when a lot of people misunderstand when they come to get you and they take you to craft, they are checking on our evolutionary stage, our mental capability. For me, they're checking to see how am I balancing out my human world and this extraterrestrial world? How am I, balancing these things out? And they're also doing an exam on me to check my health and well-being. And they have done a lot of things on me. I've had many experiences where I didn't ask them to do anything, but they did surgical procedures, but not anything like how we do things here on Earth. And right. There's no such thing as probing or anything like that. They are so far ahead in technology. They don't have to do things like that.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your experiences. It's quite eye-opening. It was very interesting. It was very, very interesting. So I appreciate you coming on.
I hope I answered some of your questions, and I hope I have to admit I feel very calm talking to you. So it was easy.
Good. So well, I appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome back here anytime.
All right, I'd be glad to.
I appreciate you. So
yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put you backstage, so don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Close out the show. So
Nancy, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy. All right, Nancy Thames there. Very interesting story. What do you guys think? Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think, and we'll get to them. So I appreciate Nancy coming on and taking the time to chat with us. So once again, remember, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. We have a lot of cool things coming up. You don't want to miss any of that coming up down the pipeline. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate you. Until we meet again, I will see you on the next episode of Paranormal Among Us.